Well, normal services resume with India registering a thumping 100 runs win over Zimbabwe, taking the series to 1-all, and Abhishek Sharma scoring a century to announce himself on the international stage. All the questions on India's bench strength can, for the time being, put to rest, but conversations can continue, and for that, we've got Rob Barron, and this is Cricket8 Podcast. Welcome, Rob.
Hello, good to see you, Megha. How you doing?
Oh, I'm fine, and I'm particularly fine after that win that India registered against Zimbabwe. Your thoughts on Abhishek Sharma to begin with? You've seen a lot of him in the IPL, but then there were conversations around the IPL wickets being very different to what Harare had to offer. But Abhishek Sharma showed that there were more gears to his game than what he showed in the IPL.
Yeah, when you look at it in isolation, he got 147 balls, and you think, right, he must have been smacking it right from the
Yeah.
top, but he didn't. He didn't at all. He basically had a very calm and composed 50, and then he went absolutely berserk and did what Abhishek does. So you're right. He showed a different string to his bow, or strength in his game, however you want to put it, and took his time and got them completely match-winning score, which was 120 runs better than they managed in the first game. We can't. I'm not going to just let you talk about the second game. There was another game in this series where Abhishek got a duck, didn't he? And
Football duck.
nobody stood up at all. Nobody took
Yeah.
responsibility at all. Gill looked like he was going to do it, and then he got out for 30 or 30 or whatever it was. But yeah, we know how talented Abhishek is, and the fact that he's blazed 100. Again, the scoreboard tells you that he blazed 100 by whacking it all the way through, but he didn't. He took his time. If ever you can take time scoring at a strike rate of 212, Abhishek did, because Abhishek can score at 300 when he's going. I think he is coming of age before our eyes, this guy, and there's a lot more to come from him because he's had a good few goes at the IPL before he basically cracked it this year. And what were we saying? Was it 28 balls was his longest innings in the IPL?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he showed what he can do when he hangs around for 47 balls. He's got a very high ceiling, as has Jaiswal, who we'll talk about in a bit. But India, whatever happened to them in the first game, whether it was rustiness or underestimating the opposition or change of conditions or whatever it was, they totally hammered Zimbabwe after being pretty rubbish in the first T20. Bearing in mind that, first innings, you think everything's absolutely fine. They got
Yeah.
115. And Washington and Bishnoi got in 8 overs, they got 6 for 24. Now, if 40% of your overs is 6 for 24, you really shouldn't be in a position to lose that game. And they just ran out of steam. And even though we spoke about the embarrassment of riches they've got in the batting, they went Sundar at 7 and then basically 4 number 11s after that. And once they got, Washington was one that did hang around for a bit, and it was kind of, will he do it by himself at the end? There's no one after him. Like, Avish can try and whack a few, but when Bishnoi's your number 8, that's a very long tail. And so it looks like maybe the management underestimated Zimbabwe a bit, but yeah, whatever happened in that first one, they dusted themselves off pretty well and came back very strong in the second. And are
There's
you
another
expecting them
thing.
to hammer from
Mhm.
here? Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I do expect them to go ahead with a 4-1 margin and seal the series. But you talked about the Indian bowling attack and how well Bishnoi fared in the first game alongside Washington Sundar. In the second game, what really stood out was the fact that India only had 4 frontline bowlers, and I include Washington Sundar when I talk about that number. Abhishek Sharma got to bowl, Riyan Parag got to bowl. Riyan Parag probably being introduced only after India had ensured that they couldn't lose from that point. 7 wickets already down for Zimbabwe. They'd already scored 234 runs. It was anyway on that two-paced wicket. It was anyway going to be difficult to chase those many for Zimbabwe, considering the bowling attack that India has, even with just 4 bowlers, 4 proper bowlers. But then Abhishek Sharma, first over was taken for 19. Riyan Parag gave a fair account of himself. All in all, when we were discussing the squad, there was this question: where are the all-rounders? Washington Sundar maybe puts his hand up when we ask that question. Abhishek Sharma, the bowling side of it, we've not seen as much in the IPL. Impact player rule as well, causing a hindrance in the development of all-rounders as far as India is concerned. But eventually, going ahead in such tours, India needs to nurture all rounders. Once Nitish Reddy was injured, there was one all rounder, obviously not featuring. Shivam Dubey was his replacement. He'd be joining the squad now. But what other all round options do you see in the Indian domestic cricket and you think India should back going ahead? Because they do need all rounders. This World Cup reinstated the same.
Yeah. So first of all, Washington has stepped up in this series. He was basically the only one, because I'm not having you call Shivam Dube an all-rounder as far as international cricket goes, because he's just not up to it yet. He's not up to it with his
Yeah,
bowling right now. I'm not saying that it's impossible that he will improve, but at the moment, if he came on in a World Cup game, and you're expecting that over to go for 14 or 15, aren't you? I think, yeah, Washington stepped up. I'm also not accepting Parag as somebody who's an all-rounder.
yeah,
I'm not. I don't even know what you'd call his bowling type, just flying saucers or round arm nonsense or whatever it is. But yeah, he's not an all-rounder. I think that's an area where you've got Axar anyway in India, so that's everybody would pick Axar if they could get hold of him. All the other countries would pick Axar. Jadeja's powers are definitely waning, and
mm,
Reddy is a guy whose bowling is not quite there yet, but has shown a
yeah,
lot of potential. His batting looked great in the IPL, but he was another one that he ranges from being quite good to okay to rubbish with his bowling, and sometimes he looked very hittable in the IPL. But he's a young kid, and he's got plenty of scope for improvement. So I think for him personally, Reddy, he's the one that can go. Well, there's definitely a gap here because
yeah,
Hardik doesn't stay fit all that regularly. He's turned up in the World Cup, Hardik, after having a pretty indifferent IPL where a lot of the Indian public got on his back, particularly the Mumbai
mm,
fans, didn't they? Um, but I would say that if I was ready, who else is knocking on the door? I'm running through names here, and I
mm,
know Shardul's had his chance, hasn't he? Shardul's not your
yeah,
man for T20s.
mm,
He looked like he was going to be the pace bowling all rounder for quite a while, and now
yeah,
you can't trust him with anything. He's funny. He still can whack it. Get you the
yeah.
occasional 20 off 8, but Avish Khan looks like he can hit a few boundaries the way he's been batting lately. He's
How
definitely
about his
got a
fielding?
again massively improving. Um, I'm still thinking of names here, and in the IPL, it
Yeah.
wasn't like, you've got this Indian all rounder that's absolutely bossing it right now. I can't think of anyone. I really can't.
Mm,
We've the names we've already mentioned. Everyone
mm,
said Harshal Patel was a brilliant opener and had all
yeah,
all the he's not done anything with the bat in the IPL for
yeah,
years. Um,
mm,
I mean, who is it? I just don't know.
yeah.
So if I'm ready, I am having watched Shardul kind of failed to take his chance T20 wise, and Hardik being injured quite a lot, he's got a big chance. But yeah, I'm not having Dubey or Parag as all rounders. They need to become competent bowlers before you can put them in that category.
Mm. In that series against Afghanistan, Shivam Dube did get to bowl quite a lot, including the last over in one of the games. India was trying to nurture him and turn him into the all rounder that they were looking for. There was a while in between when they tried Venkatesh Iyer as well. And if you remember his first season, 2021 edition, it was in the second leg, of course, that he was given a debut and he stepped up straight away with the bat in his very first game. Subsequently, he was also given bowling responsibilities. We saw him bowl in the death overs as well. He was tidy, not really exceptional, but tidy, and that's what probably India is expecting from that seam bowling all rounder at the moment. But eventually, again, didn't get to bowl a whole lot. His batting form as well waned, and he was kind of India was trying to fit him into the plan, and that's why he got to make his debut as well, because otherwise you have to play certain number of years in the IPL and show your mettle before you are considered for a look in the Indian team. But India desperately needs all-rounders, and India is trying to groom all-rounders. And Karan has got a question that is related to what we are discussing. Would you approach this all-rounder issue by looking for guys that are ready, or instead try upskilling bowlers to bat, hit more instead of sneaking overs of rubbish from Parag or Abhishek? Now, Abhishek bowls a whole lot in domestic cricket. He's a captain as well gets to bowl and has done fairly well. Riyan Parag, not as much. Even in the IPL, didn't get to see him bowl that much. And as far as Abhishek is concerned, before this addition with Sunrise Hyderabad, he has bowled a fair bit, not a lot, having mentioned that. Uh, but then we've seen that with the Indian bowlers, Kuldeep Yadav, for example, and that was on display against England. He's improved his batting skills. Arshdeep now can hit a ball or two. Jasprit Bumrah also has covered quite a distance from where he started as somebody who can chip in with runs down the order. Which approach would you prefer? And somehow we tend to gravitate towards creating all rounders, towards looking at players who actually come with all round skills rather than upskilling bowlers.
Yeah, so I think uh, you just kind of need to be lucky and have people who are naturally good. If you end up getting somebody who's naturally good with bat and ball and who can field as well, ideally, then great. The guys that are brilliant at both, come along once in a generation if you're lucky.
Yeah.
What doesn't work, and we've seen this in 50 over World Cups in the past, is you just try and cobble together a fifth bowler from somewhere and hope everything will be all right. And we watched South Africa make de Villiers bowl in a 50 over World Cup. And we also watched India go in with Virat Kohli. It wasn't that long
Yeah.
ago that Virat Kohli was meant
Yeah.
to bowl
Last year?
during World Cups. And they go, well, we've got uh, Jadav and we've got the Pathan brothers and we've got all these people that can do
Hmm.
lots of stuff. It's fine. Talking about Abhishek's really young and he proved, was it Rajasthan in the IPL knockout? The pitch
Yeah.
was hugely conducive to spin and he
Hmm.
performed great. So on
Right handers. Yeah.
certain
Nice matchup.
decks to certain bowlers, sorry, to certain batsmen, fine.
Hmm.
He's a guy that. So what you really want from your top six is one or two of them, in an
Yeah.
ideal world, more than that, who can chip in with the odd over when conditions suit. But you
Hmm.
can't turn Tawatia or Parag into an international level all rounder with the skills that they've got now. So, or Shahrukh Khan's another one that they said you'd be able
Hmm.
to get overs out of. He's bowling it from what I've seen isn't up to it at the top level. You can't really go back to Krunal, um,
Yeah.
who's he's like a bad version of Aksar. So to answer your question, yeah, sorry, go on, Megha. I can hear you want to
No,
jump in
I
there.
mean, I couldn't help laughing at the description that you had for Kunal. So anyway, the point that you were
Um,
making.
yeah, he's a bad Aksar, and he's also quite a divisive character who can wind a lot of people up. I think. I don't know the guy personally, but yeah, I remember when they kept saying Venkatesh was going to be the guy,
Yeah.
and he's a guy who is extremely inconsistent, but he's got magic in him. And sometimes I've seen his kind of medium pace average be quite effective, but again,
Yeah.
certain pitches. So sometimes when you've got a good captain who can assess conditions well, which is what Cummins did in the IPL, and went, Abhishek, we're going to need all 4 overs of you today, even though
Yeah.
you don't normally bowl. I think he bowled 1 over of like medium pacers in one of those games to open the bowling, didn't he, in the IPL? And what's happening here? And then he actually bowled really good spin, but if he then bowled that at the Wankhede at the end, he'd get absolutely slaughtered because it doesn't turn off the
Hmm.
straight, right? So when you've got these guys that can bowl the odd over in certain conditions, use them for those conditions, but don't turn up to an important T20 game saying, we've got 4 good bowlers and then you lot will have to bowl 4 overs between you, because the
Hmm.
other team knows this and they go, like someone like Klassen or Butler or whoever is just waiting for that fifth bowler and they'll score 20 and over off him. And that's where the game's gone now. If set Butler, set Klassen, set Maxwell, anybody really, um, who can hit the ball, waits for that. I mean, look at Rinku. If you bowl a bad over to Rinku, it's not going for 12, it's going for 28. And those are the
Abhishek
overs that
himself
win matches.
pounced upon that opportunity in the
Right.
last
And
game
exactly right. He did that, didn't he, Abhishek? He was just kind of like,
against. Yeah.
he was going through, and it looked like that India weren't scoring quickly enough. They were
Hmm.
49 for 1 off 8. And you think, well, get on with it, guys. And Abhishek just picked his spots. They had 4 overs that went for more than 20 in that innings.
Yeah.
Um, and that's how well these guys can hit now. So you cannot send the plan towards having 4 and a bit bowlers. You need 5, because otherwise your fifth bowler will just get murdered. And it, it's okay, like the Australia one of doing well, we've got Maxwell and Stoinis, and we might
Yeah,
have a bit of whoever else, whoever's playing that day. It's okay if they're competent. Like Maxwell's competent, he's above average for a part timer, and
absolutely.
Stoinis can bowl in certain phases. He's fine. That's okay. If you've got good ones who you could genuinely call all rounders, you can get away with having a fifth bowler who is made up of two or three people. But really, um, India have been lucky to be able to get Jadeja and
Mm,
Axar on the same in the same team. I mean, it's that really is lucky. But when you don't have those two guys, this team is showing that five bowlers is a better strategy. And then if you've got somebody like Abhishek who might be able to chip in when conditions suit, then fine. But
mm,
yeah, to answer the question there, the future of T20, considering now teams are batting properly, as in high intent, you cannot afford. It used to be you could bowl one over of rubbish spin at the start. Any old off spinner would go for five in the first over, the Michael Beer effect, and teams would say both teams would be happy with 5 or 6 for none off the first over. That's gone now. Look at what Fraser McGurk does if you bowl rubbish in the first
yeah.
over. You're 22 for none off over one, and you're under it. So that stopped. It used to be that the seventh over, everybody got 6 or 7 off the seventh over, and Jadeja kind of made his career of just going, right, I'm bowling now, and you take 6 singles, and everybody's happy. Cricket stopped doing that, and it used to be that you could go, right, we'll burgle an over in the first over, we'll get an easy one in the seventh, and when they lose a wicket in the middle, we'll just chuck the ball to this guy, and you get away with it. But now teams are starting to, they should have done this 15 years ago, but teams are starting to be clever about that now and going, this bloke is bowling, this is our chance to get 20 off and over, not, we can't afford to lose another wicket, so we're only going to get 6 off him. I think that's finished now. So the future, or the near future, should be get 5 good bowlers in. And if you don't actually have good all-rounders, Hardik is a good all-rounder, Jadeja is, Axar is, India have been very lucky. If you don't have those guys, then don't just say, well, Parag, Tawatia, and Abhishek is fine to get 4 overs out of those 3, because it isn't. They'll get woefully
Mm,
exposed. Even against Zimbabwe, they'll get exposed.
mm. To begin with, harsh words on Krunal. But now talking about Glenn Maxwell, he's probably more consistent with his off spin than he is with the bat, even for Australia, because when he comes in with the ball in his hand, you do expect him at least to be tidy. Maxwell, of course, when on song with the bat, can do things like he did against Afghanistan and score a double century and turn a match on its head from 91 for 7. But that's all well documented. Off spin options rather that India has. We'd get to that, but quickly running through some questions. We have Animax, and his question is about the options that India have already tried. Vijay Shankar, the 3D player that India got into the squad in the 2019 edition of the World Cup and drew a lot of flack as well. Shardul Thakur, of course, Shardul Thakur, the man with the magic arm, with the X factor, because you'd see him not bowl well, and suddenly in an over he'd return with 2 wickets, including that finals that he featured in for Chennai Super Kings against Kolkata Knight Riders. Which year was it? Was it 2021 edition? Yeah, 21 edition.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And Shivam Dubey, of course, has shown promise, but that has never really materialized into all round performance per se. There's another suggestion here that India should try out Ashwin Kulkarni, and that's from Prateek Bhardwaj. Pretty young at the moment, raw, hasn't, we've not seen much of him. So obviously, India would like to groom him because he does have that wherewithal. Now, we turn our attention to the spin bowling all rounder and spin bowler for that matter, off spinner rather for that matter for India. Not a whole lot of them in the IPL either. Washington Sundar featured in just 2 games for his team Sunrisers Hyderabad in this edition. Grabbed the opportunities with both his hands in the 2 matches thus far against Zimbabwe. But otherwise, firstly, addressing the question of off spinner and off spinner in the shortest format. And there was this question around who replaces Ashwin in Test. That's a different topic. But again, around an off spinner. So, does India have enough options? In domestic cricket, in the IPL, because even in the IPL, left arm spinners are still enjoying a lot of success, though the emphasis is on wrist spinners. But when it comes to off spinners, we have not seen a whole lot of those. And Washington Sundar, coming back to him, considering what he can offer with the willow in the shortest format, he's got that game. He can hit quick fire cameos, and that's what makes him special. And can bowl inside the power play overs. So considering all of that, India probably needs Washington Sundar to do well, because when matchups are involved, when conditions are conducive, you'd need Washington Sundar or somebody that brings his set of skill sets.
Yeah, I agree. And if he's the guy, and it's easy to talk about him as being the guy because he's just played well in 2 games, uh, but he's the guy that's most likely to be your sort of Ashwin replacement because he bats in a similar way. He's got similar skill level of Ashwin's batting. He hasn't got multiple Test 100 yet, but his bowling is nowhere near Ashwin. Um, his bowling is nearer to Jadeja's bowling. I know it's a different bowling type, but it's the same sort of
Yeah.
let's try and go for 6.5 and over and not get spanked. And the trouble with Washington is occasionally he does get spanked, and it's how he doesn't have 3 or 4 different deliveries and a brilliant experienced cricket brain to turn to when that happens, which Ashwin does. Ashwin can go for 18 off and over, and he'll come back and go, right, I'll do something else this over then. See how you go with this. He doesn't get totally phased by it. So, as I said last time to that question, basically stop trying to fit round pegs in square holes in terms of putting cricket teams together. India are blessed with lots of great cricketers. Pick the best spinners. They don't necessarily like. Who cares whether it's a leggy? If the leggy's way better than the offie, play the leggy then, um,
Mm.
or it's a left arm instead of a right arm. Like I think analysts, analysts, and people that love their cricket like we do, that watch absolutely loads of it, they get way too obsessed with the matchup stuff and people having right hand, left hand, and people batting with this hand or fielding with this hand and stuff. It's like, never mind all that. If you've got a cricketer who's 85 out of 100 in terms of skill level and one who's 60 out of 100, pick the guy who's 85 because you're going to win more cricket matches that way. And that's what it boils down to. Make yourself the most likely you can in terms of selection and the things you can control off the field. Make yourself as likely as you can to win the game on the field. So stop picking guys just because we need an off spinner. Why do you need an off spinner? Australia didn't need one when they had Shane Warne, did they? They were
Mm.
perfectly happy playing the best leg spinner in the world. Why would Sri Lanka? But like Sri Lanka for about 5 years, they had Murali at one end and Chaminda Vass at the other, and then and they were like, we don't really need to bowl anybody else here. Like we can
Mm.
rotate when Vass gets tired, but Murali will bowl from one end all day, and he's going to go at one and over, and he's going to get you eventually if you try and take any risk. And everyone was like, well, the other guys aren't all that good. They didn't need other guys because they've got two blokes, or one bloke is definitely bowling half the overs all day because he was the best in the whole world. So you fit your cricket team around the resources that you've got. So it's easy to say, oh, well, we haven't got great off spinning all rounders right now because Washington isn't the answer the way he makes up at this moment. He might be in 3 or 4 years' time. But you've got loads of bowlers who are really good and can do other stuff. And yet, if you don't have an off spinning all rounder, I think I actually think the pace bowling all rounder is the one where India look a little bit weak when Hardik's done, because
Yeah.
there's no, like, Reddy might be,
Mm.
but I haven't seen enough of his bowling to suggest that he's going to be Hardik, because when Hardik's bowling pre-injury, Hardik's bowling was almost frontline bowler quality. Like, you could bowl him at the top and you could bowl him at the end and you could bowl him in the middle, and that's a huge asset to have for somebody that's a proper batsman. So I think that's the bit where India may struggle, and the guys that are, people like Venkatesh, not him explicitly, but people like him who are good enough with the bat to play in the top three for an IPL team and bowl the odd over, they need to go away and work over and over again in the nets and in domestic cricket at their bowling and stake a claim, because Hardik gets injured a lot. That's a fact. And he ain't going to be
Yeah.
around forever. And there's no natural successor yet. So, um, was it Kolkani, the guy said?
Yeah.
He got a brief go in the IPL, didn't he? Came in as an impact
Yeah.
sub and was, um, anybody can be bad in an innings or two. I think he got like a duck and then he got 5 off 8 or something in his other one, and he didn't look up to it. But the kid's 19. He
Mm.
may be one that can step up and do it. But yeah, I'd say that the batting is always going to be fine because you've got nigh on a billion kids out in the street as we speak batting. It's and a lot of other countries don't have that. So India's batting is always going to be fine. But yeah, pace bowling all rounders. Look in the world, there aren't that many of them that are any good.
Yeah.
Um, that's the bit where I think India have a question to answer, but they've got lots of young talent who just need to probably practice their bowling a bit more.
To reiterate your point on Hardik, since the time he broke into the Mumbai Indians team, there was a lot of interest surrounding him, and that was because he was ticking a lot of boxes and he was fitting in the description that India were looking at, the vacancy that India had announced. And if you remember that game in the Asia Cup against Sri Lanka, and when you were talking about him prior to that injury in the World Cup, that really fits in place. This example fits in place with that, because that game against Sri Lanka, the wicket was conducive for spin. The spinners did really well as India were batting. And in the second innings, Indian spinners didn't leave much of an imprint, and it was Hardik Pandya and him drying up the flow of runs that actually resulted in a shift of momentum. So he's been that player who could win you, who could win India games with the ball as well. And that's quite a difficult description to match for any all rounder who's throwing his hat in the ring. Now, Kapil Verma has got a very pertinent question, and it is around how India has not produced quality all rounders despite 15 years of the IPL. We've got Arshdeep in recent times, excluding him and Bumrah. Why don't we even have quality fast bowlers? Now, who are the fast bowlers who can step up? And there was a similar question, as I try and dig that up and as I try and publish it, your response in the same.
Yeah, so they've had Shami for quite a few years, and we know Shami's coming towards the end now, but Shami is an absolutely
Yeah.
quality performer. And I can see that Santosh there has just brought up Mayank Yadav, who, when we did see flashes of him in the IPL, like
Hmm.
three and a bit games or whatever it was, he was box office, right? He had everybody hopping around, and he was the guy. And I watched pretty much every game of the IPL this year. He was the guy I wanted to watch the most. He was the guy I was most excited about. I wasn't going to go and make a cup of tea when he was bowling. Like, he was absolutely brilliant. But the problem there is he couldn't stay on the park, and it looked like he was an injury doubt right at the start. And you're just kind of praying that he gets through 4 overs, and that's not great when you've got somebody who, like, he could be anything, but we've seen with Jofra Archer and other bowlers that burst onto the scene and are like, this guy is going to be a world beater in all formats. Look how good he is. It's so hard when you bowl that fast to keep your body kind of cricket ready. So I don't know what the answers are biomechanically, but yeah, that guy is somebody who was extremely exciting. Shami's been very, very good. They have guys that are okay, like Avesh is fine as an IPL bowler. He's been a bit up and down in the IPL. He's fine. Mukesh Kumar, I think, has the ability to develop really good death skills. Like, he's an experienced guy now because he's
Yeah.
30. He's got really good death skills, but it's so hard to bring really good death skills over and over again. And there's only Bumrah in the whole world that can do it every time. And he does it every time. No one else can do that. Look at
Yeah.
someone like Chris Jordan, who's been a death bowler for England for a decade. About half the time, he's hopeless. And it's not because he's hopeless at cricket, right? He practices nailing Yorkers and slower balls and wide Yorkers and changes of pace and all this, right? He's got a lot of big bag of tricks. But when you're coming up against marauding hitters that have been in for 30 balls, it doesn't really matter who you are. Like, no one else has cracked it other than Bumrah, who somehow, and I've watched a lot of Bumrah kind of after games to try and work out what he's doing. There are balls that Bumrah bowls, and he's getting like drift and then some sort of weird turn off the wicket. You're like, how are you doing that at 85 miles an hour? How is it even possible? So, and there are guys that we see turn up in the IPO. I can see somebody mention it there. Umran Malik, who, when he turned up, you're
Yeah.
like, he's got lots of things that you can harness. You know, if you can get this raw pace into a cricketer, then
Hmm.
it's going to be amazing. And then he turned up an IPL or two later for, we saw him for SRH. And you're like, wow, this is
Yeah.
scary. He's really quick. And he came back and he's just like, well, he's landing it really quickly into the slot in the power play over and over again. And it's like, well, his overs are going to go for 20 because he hasn't
Yeah.
worked out how to harness it. So that's
Hmm.
where the individual has got to take a lot of that responsibility on and go away but India have almost untold money. By the time you're a professional cricketer, you can kind of have whatever you want if you're Indian. They should be having guys with people like him and going, him and Mayank Yadav, and going, look, think about how scary India's team would be if you had those guys bowling rockets, but had a
Yeah.
slower ball or had some
Mm.
kind of variation, or the bouncer was better directed or something. Presumably, when you're that good at cricket that you've played for India, you've got enough skills that you can go away and change some of them and develop them. Because
Mm.
the thing about Bumrah is he's getting better every year, and which is terrifying for everybody. But he is actually improving all the time, and we've seen guys burst onto the scene that then kind of disappear a bit, and some of that is it's an extremely high pressure environment. But
Yeah.
some of that, I'm sure, is that they just need to work a bit harder. I mean, we've not mentioned Siraj, who is way better in other formats
Mm.
than
The
he is in
shortest
T20 for
format.
me. I
Yeah.
don't think he particularly likes T20s. He doesn't bowl like he likes T20 sometimes. I think he needs the ball to swing early, and then he gets his tail up and he starts backing himself a bit. But yeah, like, it's easy to say, well, the Indian pace bowling isn't all that apart from Bumrah. Firstly, Bumrah's like as good as any other three bowlers combined, so you kind of cracked it already if you got him. And look around the world, there's no one that you're like, their pace bowling attack is brilliant. Like, nobody's like that in world cricket right now. South Africa looked like it might be a few years ago. Rabada
Australia,
and Nortje is
maybe.
fine on paper. I think Australia had this kind of the same 3 or 4 guys every time in the attack, and
Yeah.
it works quite well. When one of them, Stark, who was probably the best white ball quick before Bumrah came along, like consistently in 50
Mm.
over and 20 over World Cups, he's been great. Hazelwood just has this knack of, if the pitch suits him, he can land it exactly where he wants every time. But I think the way cricket's developing now, he's going to get away with that less and less. He's going to be smashed a few times just trying to bowl test match bowling. Cummins has improved a lot, but he's better in other formats. Like, Cummins is better at Test than he is in
Yeah.
T20s, for example. Yeah, I mean that's the one that stands out, isn't it? The Australia kind of, because of the nature of the pitches in their country.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fast, bouncy pitches, and you better be good at bowling quick on those type of pitches, or you're going to go. I think India's pace bowling stocks are fine, compared to other nations in the world. I think they're fine. Look at
Mm.
England. Like, West Indies is pretty exciting on paper. They've
Yeah.
got some guys that could. Yeah, again, it's about development, and India don't have the problem of cash and
Mm.
resources, whereas West Indies definitely do. So it's difficult to get all those islands together, and somebody can come on the scene in the West Indies. And we've seen people like O'Shane Thomas and Obed McCoy and stuff. Obed's had his goes in the IPL for Rajasthan, who looked great, and then they get injured and you kind of don't hear much of them, and they come back and they get hit and then they've disappeared again. And is it Shamar Joseph who got one? Did he get one game in the IPL, or did he
This
get two?
season,
Yeah, one or
I
two
think a
games they
couple.
gave him,
Yeah.
because his first over was, he was way too pumped up and he bowled like wides and no balls and all sorts of stuff. But it was exciting. He's a guy that could be anything. But India's pace bowling is fine. I think when you've got Bumrah, you don't need much else. But India's pace bowling is fine compared to the other countries. Just to answer that question directly, that's on the
Mm.
screen there. Um, an express fast bowler is as valuable as it's ever been, but you need the ability to have variations and not
Yeah.
just have not just being quick. Like, Lockie has discovered that a lot. Like, when Lockie
Mm.
turned up, he was wheels, and he had a really good Yorker. And then bats, the thing about cricket today is they have loads of time to work it out, these teams. Like,
Yeah.
you face Lockie for the first time and he's going to go through you and clean you up. But when you realise that he was bowling 5 balls out of 6 in the same place and the other one was short, they come up with plans, and they've got videos and machines that can replicate the release point and all the rest of it. So bowlers need to keep developing. But high pace, ask anyone that plays cricket, we're talking over 150. There are a few guys that can bowl 140 something, but when you start getting past 145 and 150 or 90 plus miles an hour in old money, that's when players are going to struggle. Like,
Mm.
Only the very best can negotiate high pace, absolutely no problem. And we don't have that many of them around anymore. Like Jofra could have been that guy that bowled high pace and was really good at everything, but the ECB knackered him. Yeah, there's still definitely a place for high pace, but there aren't that many that can harness it, and that's what you need to do. It's one thing being able to harness it, but if you haven't got a driver of the car's going to crash, isn't it?
Well, even around Umran Malik, there was a lot of interest initially. He was in just as a net bowler, but because of the sheer pace that he generated, Sunrisers Hyderabad got him into the squad and then subsequently in the 11. The second season that he featured in was disciplined, did well, but just the way he was used, that stood out because he'd primarily be used in the middle overs. And subsequently, that changed how Sunrise Hyderabad used him. Now, these IPL teams are there to obviously win the titles. And while the development is an important part of what they do, but that's not going to be the most important thing. And there was another question around Washington Sundar, and this was from Santosh Kumar. If Washington Sundar has not established himself as a premier all rounder by now, he doesn't see it happening in the future. We should start looking beyond him, but there are not a lot of options beyond him, and that's why we're continuing to turn to him. And additionally, he's got age by his side. That's another reason why India got him into the squad for the Zimbabwe tour. But again, covering the topic of development for Washington Sundar as well, he has had his fair bit of struggles with injuries, and that's also one of the reasons why we've not seen a lot of him in the IPL. But this season, maybe it wasn't because of the injury issue, but more so to do with the combination. So the IPL teams are going to be very particular about what combination fits them on a given day in certain conditions and against a certain opposition. And it's up to the domestic teams, it's up to the BCCI to nurture and to help players develop. There are resources, of course, and BCCI has also created a pool of fast bowlers who are taken care of, or whose concerns are addressed, including Umran Malik and Mayank Yadav. Their issues are addressed, but it's also up to the bowlers to make progress as they move ahead because, like you alluded in case of Jasprit Bumrah, he's been a better version of himself every year, and that probably is extremely important. Nani Kaur has an observation. Why is Rob so serious? Probably now he's made note of this observation, and you'd see him smiling and laughing at his
No,
own jokes.
no way. I'm
No?
not here for that. Um, yeah, I'm here to talk very seriously and angrily about cricket, and I will. I see no fun in this. It's all serious business. And whoever that was that just said you've got to give up on Washington, he's 24, man. Like,
Yeah.
give him a chance. He's 24 years old and he's been injured a lot. He's proven this week that he can still play. Like, you want to be developing 24-year-old potential all-star all-rounders because he's probably not going to be at his best for another 5 years. So you've got plenty of
Mm.
time. Like, who else are you going to do it with? Yeah, you can't chuck somebody on the scrap heap at 24. Why am
Mm.
I so serious? Don't know. Don't know. I'm not here
Because
to answer to get into my own psychology.
yeah, that psychoanalysis would be pretty interesting. There's another question that was focused on you, and no one knows, none knows, and yet is expecting us to answer. Did you punch yourself in the head when you realized that India played a top five containing Gill, Ruturaj, Parag, and Sai Sudarshan? And probably, if you did, then it wasn't your head that took the hit, it was rather your hand because we can see something wrapped around it.
Yeah,
West
my
Indies colors?
my
A
head
dull
is
version
a
of it?
my head is a lot harder than my hand. You see, so if I ever punch myself in the head, it'd be my hand that came off worse. But yeah, it's a top five when you've got four of those guys that are in the wrong place. We spoke about this before. It's like it's one thing to pick ex cricketers that you have available, but you've got to pick a cricket team, and you can't pick four anchors out of five, and you can't pick five openers in a row. You've got to, but this is a series. I mean, a 5-match series with Zimbabwe a week after we've just seen a World Cup finish sounds a bit silly, doesn't it? And Zimbabwe don't often get 5-match series against India, for example. But India clearly want to experiment with stuff and with people and see who steps up and who doesn't. Um, and they are they're changing eras almost now with those three very high profile retirements on the same day. You know, it's a bit like when Australia did it when they all retired on the
Yeah.
same day when they played that Ashes game against England when they won 5-0. It's like, right, us three are clearing off now. There's no McGrath, there's no Warne. It's yeah, it is change. So that's why they did it. I didn't punch myself in the head when I saw it, but there are like if I punch myself in the head every time I disagree with the batting order, then I'd have no hands or head left. Like teams get it wrong all the time. Um, Batting orders are still crazy. Like I'm watching the Legends League at the moment because I can't help myself. I know I shouldn't get drawn into watching it, but I'm watching it, and it's like Villas comes in number 7 for South Africa, and he's the only one that can bat, and he gets 45 not out of 16 balls or something. And you're like, well, you've got at least 50 less than you could have done if you'd have got your batting order right, just by not playing guys that are going to get 3 off 13 or whatever, behind people that can get 45 not out of 17 who can still see it and stuff like that. It's just such basics to me as batting orders. I don't have enough time today because there's only 6 hours left in the day here, to go through my thoughts on batting orders. But I think if teams had batting order coaches specifically, or captains learnt about them and stopped appeasing people and saying, like, apparently Steve Smith in the test matches just says, I'm batting here, and that's the end of it. And there are times when you don't want Smith and Labuschagne because you've got to get on with it. You've got to set the declaration up or try and force the win or whatever it is. And Smith doesn't want to play like that. Like, we've seen that he can do. We've seen him smack unbelievable hundreds in the Big Bash opening the batting when he doesn't put a price on his wicket. But yeah, batting orders can win you matches and can add expected runs, which putting my analyst hat back on, that's what you're meant to do as an analyst, is you add expected runs for your. You're not saying I'm going to tell you what to do to win the match. You say I am going to tell you something that if you put it in place, you'll be worth 5 runs more batting first, which is a lot. I will make you 2 or 3% more likely to win this game. And when we're bowling, if you put this guy, if you open the bowling with him and you don't let Dubé bowl the 15th because it's gone a bit quiet and all this sort of thing, if you actually bowl people at the right time, you're worth 5 runs better when you're defending, this sort of thing. It's not done enough. There will be no player input to this in, I don't know, 20 years time. It will just be some girl or guy going, you bat next. A bit like they do in baseball, right? So in baseball, they have a pitcher who stands on the mound in front of thousands of people, and they have certain analysts just looking at his arm, at the pitcher's arm. That's all they're looking at. They're looking at the position of his elbow with computers and clever machines and all this stuff. And the second that he drops, that the level drops, and he's not going to be able to pitch the ball at a certain speed, they go, off you go away. They don't think about his ego. And he goes, oh, right, yeah, I must have thrown too many pitches now. My arm's gone. And he's thrown 50 pitches or 60 pitches, and his elbow can't cope with it anymore. So they go, you're off and you're going on. There's never any ceremony or thinking about that person's ego. It's just like maths. This is it. Your arm's gone, next guy in. And if the next guy comes in and looks rubbish, and he's thrown 5 pitches, and they've loaded the bases, they don't go, oh, keep going, mate, you'll be fine. They go, off. We've got another guy waiting who's just warmed his arm up, and we didn't know whether to pick him or you. You're having a bad day. Off you go. In 20 years' time, when they get this, and India are quite big culprits of this kind of ego massaging out the way and concentrate on trying to win matches, you will have people that are just, you're 3 off 10, off. None of this, oh, hang around, stick it out, see how. It's a 20 over game. You can't do another 3 off 10. So you hit the next ball for 6 or we're dragging you. And that's going to happen in the future. There's going to be people watching this stuff way more dispassionately and stop saying, oh, well, it's Rohit, or oh, it's Virat. Oh, well, he must do this and we must wait for Babar to get his 50. Nonsense. Like, if he's stinking the place out and you've got 8 wickets in hand, tell him to come off. But you need a big change in cricket. You need stronger management and a realization from the players that you're there to try and win the match. And sometimes that means me not batting or not fielding in the position that I like the best, or not batting in the number that I want to bat, can help my team have a better chance of winning, uh, then it may happen. But it's going to take a team, like probably an associate team that is well managed and well advised, to suddenly spring from nowhere because they're doing this, that, and the other. And the game will change. Mark my words, it will do. But at the moment, there's still plenty of pandering to big names and ego massaging and milestone and average hunting. And that must stop for teams to get optimal scores. And we watched 165 get chased in 9 overs in this IPL. And that day, and we watched 260 get scored when they could have scored 300. And we watched 260 get chased easily. One down, was it? One down that was a run out, Punjab? And you think, where is the ceiling here? Because it used to be 200s way too many, and then it was 220s, an unbelievable score. And that day, 260 wasn't enough. They needed 300 to defend it. And 300 is achievable if you bat with full aggression from the start and it all goes well for you. 300 is achievable. It will happen within the next 12 months in a T20. Someone will get 300.
Interesting.
And they just need teams to be a bit smarter and harsher on individuals, which is very difficult when those individuals are people like Virat Kohli.
Well, that was quite a statement to make. But retired out probably has been introduced to facilitate the point that you were making. Now, let's get you angrier. Akash has gone on to talk about England. If Jamie underperforms, will they go with Ollie Robinson, as Ollie's strike rates are better than Jamie? And why was he picked over Jamie in the first place? We've discussed this before, and this is a question that has again come up. The next comment, I'd get you to read that, but before that, let's address this and also England's playing 11, which has already been announced.
So, it's right that they've gone Jamie Smith, as I mentioned last time. I totally agree. They've got different strike rates, but England have based a lot of their selections on weird stuff down the years, and sometimes it's gone really well. Like we said, like Marcus Trescothick was just a guy that they identified as like, this guy could really be good for us at the top of the order, and his numbers didn't look all that, and he was a revelation. I don't agree with the way that they've gone about picking Bashir, but I kind of get why that they had to think outside the box picking English spinners, because we haven't got any. That's why they have to do it. They have to go off weird metrics and viral videos and whatever else it is, because there's nobody that's any good at bowling spin in England at the moment. So you might as well go a different route. That I've seen a lot of Smith and I haven't seen a lot of Robinson. So I'm not a very fair test match selector, to be honest. But Smith has definitely got the lots of different shots. And if England think, McCullum and Stokes, that he's got something about him more than Robinson has, and that's unquantifiable, and you're not going to find it on a spreadsheet. And as an analyst, it's very difficult to say, pick this guy instead of this guy, because they've got much different numbers, and these numbers are worse, but this guy's got something about him. Like, it's nonsense when you say it out loud, but you kind of have to trust people like McCullum. Excuse me. About McCullum and Stokes, you have to trust those guys. Something's flown into my throat.
Yeah, I guess with the
You
statement
talk
that
for a
you
bit,
made on
Megha.
Virat Kohli, the statement that you made on Virat Kohli, I guess,
Virat Kohli's a brilliant cricketer, just to clarify the point I was making there. But he is somebody that is almost bigger than the game, right? Because of what he's achieved and what he has around him. And he had Sachin before him, and you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but to a slightly lesser extent, Dhoni afterwards, that were almost bigger than the game because of what they achieved within the game. And Sachin's way was, I remember when Chappell didn't pick him and the whole of India went absolutely berserk, didn't they? Sachin was
and it wasn't even about Sachin not being picked. It was just about Sachin not being happy with how things were unfolding.
Yeah. But when you get somebody who's that big of a star, and the thing is, in India, we saw the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that were lining the streets just to welcome the guys back. They weren't playing a cricket match. It was just because they were getting off the plane, and they're filling a stadium up with people queuing outside.
Yeah.
That's religion. So what the point I'm trying to make about Virat is not necessarily that he goes too slowly all the time. He does it sometimes. It's that he is almost bigger than the game. And who on earth can come into an Indian dressing room, and I literally mean who on this earth could go into an Indian dressing room and say, Virat, we're chasing 240. You're not opening today, mate. And you go, why?
Mm.
And who can have that conversation with him? He's bigger than the game in terms. So sometimes, like, if Babar gets out in the first over when Pakistan are chasing 200, sometimes that's better for them, because he could easily be 50 or 50 and they can't win. Whereas if you're going to chase these ridiculous scores, you don't need anchors. You need guys that blaze it, and you need them to come off. So certain times, the Steve Smith one is quite a good example in ODIs. When Smith is like, "I'm batting 3 today, lads, and you can just deal with that." It's like, well, sorry, like we're none down, and if we're none down after 15 overs of a 50 over game. If we lose a wicket now, we don't want you coming in and scoring at 4 and over and sucking the momentum out of the game. We want Maxi to go in, or Stoyne, to smash this bad pace that they're bowling. And you need to be malleable. So I must clarify that, otherwise I'm going to get a fair bit of hate for dissing Kohli.
Look how you got your voice back just when you uttered the name Virat Kohli. But yeah, I mean, he did rediscover himself. He did bring a different gear to his batting. There was a lot of flack that he faced during the IPL, particularly the first part. And after that, we started seeing shots that he wouldn't play otherwise, and him accelerating against these spinners. So. And again, like you mentioned, who in the management can have that courage to go up to Virat Kohli and say that you need to play differently? One, I think Virat Kohli, considering his game awareness, would have that realization himself. And otherwise, as well, with this Indian think tank, there was this understanding that Virat Kohli too would try and go for big hits right from the word go. And that's why probably he lost his wickets early on in the World Cup, and up until the finals, we did get to see the Virat Kohli that we were not familiar with, because he'd try and go for the big hits, he'd try and go for the slogs, and that's why eventually he was averaging, at least till the finals, was averaging under 10. Now there's a comment, Rob, and I want you to read it. Here we go.
Thanks, Mum.
No, you have
Yeah,
to read it out
Rob has
for
better
people
cricketing
listening.
knowledge than some legends around the world. I think all legends around the world is the wording you've got wrong there. But no, thanks, Avinash. But unfortunately, or however you want to put it, I watch an extremely unhealthy amount of cricket. It is my day job as well. So the company that I work for now, we cover 8,000 cricket matches a year, which is a lot. And so some of the cricket that we cover and have streams for, I can pretty much guarantee that everybody watching and listening will have played at a higher standard than some of the stuff we do. I watch everything. I can't get enough of it. I won't turn my camera around because I'll break something, but my office is full of cricket books and memorabilia, and I'm proper tragic with it. Yeah, so I have zero ability to play the game, unfortunately. So I just watch it and bet on it and study it as much as I can. So yeah, I think that ultimately when you can see it, because when you study betting markets as much as you study cricket, you can see how they marry up. And it's like, if this guy comes on to bowl now, the market will move in favor of the bowlers. If this guy comes on to bowl now, it will move in favor of the batsman. Now, I am not in a position where I could say to any of these international bowlers, this is how you should bowl, because they know what they're doing. Like, they've achieved enough to get to international cricket, and I can't get in my village team over 40s team at the moment, right? But I can say to a cricket team, if this guy bowls now, you will be 2% more likely to win. If this guy bowls now, you'll be 3% less likely to win. That's the maths of it. That's a fact. And someone could say, well, it can't be a fact because all these win predictors are nonsense. I'm talking about the betting markets that have got potentially hundreds of millions of pounds of syndicate clever money of multi-millionaires that are sat there with very sophisticated algorithms and models. And you can get, I don't want to get too much into the geekery or the betting of stuff, but sometimes it's like, it's so obvious that you've got to get on with it at this point or slow down at this point in certain formats, and they, for whatever reason, don't do it. And what I think cricket needs to get away from is when you've got the big egos in your team, like Steve Smith, like I don't know how big Babar's ego is, but he gets criticism for it, and Virat has definitely got criticism for it. He's just like, lads, we're not, and bear in mind, Virat can gun it with the best of them. When he set at the end, his death hitting is as good as anyone ever. Ask Pakistan how good Virat's death hitting is. It's just sometimes the criticism of the guys that tend to look for milestones rather than optimizing their score. You know, somebody like Guptill who nearly got run out when he got his 260 or whatever it was in the World Cup. Off the last ball because he just carried on running. Like, that's what I want to see from my players, not turning down singles off the last ball because they want to protect their average. All of that's got to go from cricket. But when it comes to knowing loads, it's not because I'm clever, it's because I watch an unhealthy amount of cricket.
And if there was a camera installed for the matches that go on in the park close to my house, I'm pretty sure Rob would watch those as well and analyze those as well.
Yes, please.
Rakshit has got a point, and the point that he's making is you're underestimating Gautam Gambhir's ability to be blunt. Highly likely that he'd take over as the head coach from Rahul Dravid. Rahul Dravid as well has his own way of getting the messages delivered, but Gautam Gambhir's way has drawn a lot of conversations.
Right. So Dravid is somebody who he's one of those people that he could talk to basically anybody and say, I batted in arguably the best batting lineup that's ever been put on a test match field. And I was considered for many years to be the hardest man to dismiss in world cricket, and it will go down as of all time. Dravid's strength of character is definitely not in question, right? He could go into a dressing room and go, listen, guys, this is what I think. And I think everybody would listen to him because of what he's achieved in the game.
Yeah.
Now, Gambhir, and also Dravid seems like a very personable, calm, intelligent, measured sort of guy, right? From the outside. I don't know him, so I've never met him. I can't comment too much, but that's how he appears to me. And Jared met him recently, Rahul Dravid,
Yeah,
and spent the afternoon with him. Lucky sod. And
indeed.
he kind of backed up all those things. It was like, this guy has an amazing cricket brain, and you can kind of see that. You know, we've all read the letter he wrote Kevin Peterson
Yeah.
about trying to play spin and stuff. Unbelievable insight. Like, you know, that guy's incredibly bright, and the way he batted suggested he was. Gambhir, who was in a brilliant opening partnership in many formats with Sehwag. Those two work great together, right? So Gambhir has achieved a lot, and he's done it in World Cups, and he's done it in big matches. He is less measured, I think it's fair to say. He's less of a composed character, and he doesn't mind a ruck. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. My issue with Gambhir is everybody seems to have taken the fact that he's definitely going to be the next coach of India, right? One of the biggest jobs
Yeah.
in the world. Like, never mind even
Yeah.
in cricket, one of the biggest jobs on planet Earth, being in charge of the Indian cricket team. And you had Ravi Shastri doing it, who
Yeah.
has absolutely loads about him as an individual. You can just tell. Like, he can do
Hmm.
loads of stuff to do with cricket, right? Shastri. He's engaging, he's funny, he's charismatic and all that. And you get it, yeah, right, why not? And he achieved loads in the game, let's not forget. But Gambhir has zero qualifications as far as coaching goes. Nothing. He's never coached anyone, right? He's done a mentor role, which basically means
Yeah.
you were really good at cricket, so we'll stick you in, and you don't mind arguing, and you don't mind dealing with the media. So away you go, Gautam. Thanks very much, right? He's a mentor. That is basically saying we've got somebody who's great at cricket, so we're going to put them in, right? He has zero coaching qualifications, and we've spoken about in this podcast about how you're going to bring up the next generation of players. If they're going to turn these part-time bowlers into all-rounders, you don't need a mentor for that and somebody shouting at you and arguing or geeing up the dressing room. You literally need coaches. You need guys that are gonna, or ladies that are gonna be right. Biomechanically, if you do this, you will improve your skills at bowling. If you eat this, you will improve, your body shape for this type of bowling or whatever it is. That's the stuff they need. And India, it's fine. I spoke about this with Jared on one of the podcasts. It's fine if they want to have a figure at the top, but if that figure's Gambhir, he shouldn't be responsible for the actual coaching of people. That should go to qualified coaches, because he hasn't done any badges. He hasn't got any qualifications. He's just a bloke that was good at cricket, so they're calling him a mentor. But head coach of India, imagine any other industry. Like, being head of Indian cricket is up there with the biggest things in the world in terms of business and finance and all that, right? And I'm not particularly qualified to talk about that side of things. But do you think anybody who's top of the shop for, I don't know, IBM or Microsoft or Apple, like doesn't know anything, hasn't got loads of degrees and qualifications, or has come up through business and has got this kind of, whatever they call it, doctorate or PhD or whatever? They've all got all of that. And Gambhir's coaching qualifications currently are, I'm good at cricket. And we'll see how well he goes for India. But I don't know. How excited are you about his imminent appointment, Megha?
Excited for sure, because of the personality that he brings to the table. And again, the point that you made was pretty interesting. But what exactly would the head coach, his job would be? Because the support staff comprises of batting coach, bowling coach. There are times when you also have fielding coach. There are times when you have a mentor or a psychologist. Paddy Upton was there with the Indian team in the 2022 edition of the World Cup, T20 World Cup. So it's a sizable team that we are talking about, with the support staff itself. So what is the head coach supposed to do? The said head coach, apparently, because there's a batting coach already to work on the biomechanics side of things, to work on the techniques, already there. So maybe the head coach is supervising everything, ensuring that everybody functions well together. There is cohesiveness within the unit. Because remember, when Rohit Sharma took over as the captain, and Virat Kohli was the former captain, and a big name like you've already elaborated on. So it wasn't going to be easy. Virat Kohli stepped aside as a test captain, and that was a bolt from blue. That wasn't expected. And then Rohit Sharma took over. In between, there were various other captains because Rohit Sharma was injured, and there was this COVID issue because of which he couldn't be the captain against England. So all of those things constrain the head coach. His job then becomes to ensure that all the components of the team, they function together, they enjoy a good equation, are professional with each other, and are playing for each other once on the field. Even with Hardik Pandya, now, before the IPL started, and once everything was clear, once it was clear that Hardik would be the captain and Rohit Sharma would be playing under him, there were a lot of rumors floating, and Mumbai Indians didn't go on to enjoy a particularly great IPL season. But in the Indian team, once a part of the Indian team, once the World Cup started, you never got to hear any such thing. There were no conversations around how things are not that great between Hardik Pandya and Rohit Sharma. They were professional, they were clinical in their respective jobs. And at the end of it all, you could even see Rohit planting a peck on Hardik's cheek. So that probably is the job of the head coach. And if he brings with himself that pedigree, that understanding of the game, because Rahul Dravid worked at the NCA, he was there with the under 19 team, understood a lot of these youngsters close up. That would have helped, and players could have gone up to him if there was a technical issue, considering how good technically and tactically Rahul Dravid was. But again, that definition of the requirements that you'd expect from a head coach, I don't think that's really clear. And that's probably that's a reason why we are having these conversations. BCCI has coaching courses, and there are various levels to it. There are a lot of people, former cricketers with not as much pedigree as, say, Rahul Dravid or Gautam Gambhir. They pursue those courses, and they then rise up the ranks, coaching domestic teams, and then they get a look in, maybe a part of the support staff, become a part of the support staff. But the head coach's role is something that also, I think, has to be glamorous, and you wouldn't see a candidate that you've not heard a lot about becoming the head coach, I think, in India. Do you agree on that point, though?
Yeah, 100%. But I think maybe don't call that person head coach. Maybe call them, head of cricket or something. And actually, yeah, I think again with India, you've got almost unlimited money when it comes to setting your team up and the support staff and stuff. If they want 5 fielding coaches, they can have them. If they want to have every player have his own coach, then they can do that.
Yeah.
They've got enough cash for that. And I mean, England have done that level of the coaching staff of England in some of these series that we see is ludicrous. Like they're like, oh, can I bring my batting coach along? And they go, yeah, fine. And they've got nutritionists for the bats, and nutritionists for the bowlers, and here's your ice bath and all
Chefs
that. Like
and
they've got
whatnot.
yeah, exactly. It's so many people involved, and all these analysts going, have you seen this? And half the players buy into the analyst stuff, and half of them don't. And like, you can do too much with it, but yeah, like fielding's a huge thing. I'm not going to not going to talk about that now. I'll be on all day, but fielding's a massive deal. India, Kohli will leave a hole with his fielding as much as he will with his batting, or maybe not as much, but almost. Like, one of the most underrated fielders ever, Virat Kohli, absolutely brilliant at it, and brought loads of other people up to better standards because of how good he was. So that's an area where India traditionally haven't been all that great fielding, and you need a good guy or girl in to coach them. And improve that wicket keeping, all that stuff. But yeah, fine. If Gambhir doesn't do it himself, no problem. Get people that are, I've got a job and I don't do a lot of the stuff myself because there's loads of other people better at me at doing it. So you palm it off to them, right? You go, I'll focus on what I'm good at. So if Gambhir is the best guy at dealing with the media and getting the best out of those players, brilliant. Just let him do that and nothing else. But make sure you've got all the other people involved in the right jobs. And that should be something India, with all their resources and wealth behind them, should be able to do, is pick the right people. But I think the point you made about keeping everybody happy is a job that only a few people could do, because, if somebody like me walked into the place, I'd be laughed out of the dressing room, within seconds. Like, what are you doing telling me what to do here? But if Gambhir says it, and with what he's achieved in the game and what, his IPL sides have achieved and how he's changed things and what he did himself, he has a level of respect already that if you can get all those guys getting on with each other, that's a huge achievement. If you can get, Hardik and Virat and Rohit and everybody, um, like singing off the same hymn sheet, or whatever the phrase is, you've achieved so much. You're adding so much value to that team, because it's pretty obvious sometimes when players aren't getting on with each other.
Yeah.
And in India, it tends to leak as well. Like, we hear a lot, don't we, about this guy doesn't like this guy, and there's people slapping each other's face and all this kind of thing. And you go, okay, that definitely spills onto the field when the players aren't getting on, and you get bad blood, and that leads to poorer performance. So yeah, even if that's all he does is make sure that all the 11 that are on the park get on well with each other, he's done a great job. But should he be called head coach? Not for me.
Maybe we might coin a separate term for that. And to conclude this conversation with Vignesh's response to it, can you suggest a head coach other than Gambhir? I'm very scared, extremely scared, by the way. And as lucrative as the job is, India's head coach, you'd expect everybody to be interested in that position. And random people apply as well, with random credentials. And that obviously makes news every time the head coach's position is up for grabs. But are former cricketers, all the former cricketers, interested? Not really. And even those with some coaching experience in the IPL or otherwise, not everybody would be interested, because particularly this time around, the term on offer is 3 years. And for any cricketer who has achieved a considerable amount of success during his playing days, you'd expect him now, being a former cricketer, to be at least 40 plus. Having achieved that amount of success, does he want his legacy? Does he want to put his legacy at risk? Because if this coaching tenure had not panned out the way it did in the last 12 months for Rahul Dravid, what most people would have remembered him, and particularly the younger generation, how they would have remembered him, would be as somebody who didn't achieve a lot of success with the Indian team as a coach. His tactical ability, his leadership abilities would have been questioned, and you did see a lot of trolling, particularly in the initial part of his tenure. Similarly, say a Sachin Tendulkar, a Mahendra Singh Dhoni, would they be interested? Is there enough on offer for them to be interested? And I'm not just talking about it monetarily, because at that level, I'm not sure if there's any inducement that's enough monetarily. But what does one set out to achieve with having achieved that much success as a player? And again, the BCCI would consider players who bring in some pedigree, like you mentioned. It has to be somebody whose voice would be heard in the dressing room, and that's an interesting dichotomy there, because for the voices that would be heard, would they genuinely be interested? And the legacy that they're putting at stake is considerable, And for other contenders who have fair bit of coaching experience in domestic cricket at IPL level, would BCCI be interested in them? And understandably so. So that's a dilemma that one would continue to have.
Yeah, when it comes to who would do the job, so what you're up against now, if you're trying to recruit for head coach of one of the major nations, is how easy it is for these established coaches to make absolutely loads of cash on the franchise circuit, where they only
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
work for 3 months a year,
exactly.
and without any of the same kind of scrutiny or pressure that the Indian head. Can you imagine what it would be like? No, we can't imagine what it'd be like
Yeah.
being head coach of India. Like, you'd never be able to sleep, and your every move is scrutinized, and there's people outside your house when India lose. Like most coaches, you look at people like Flower and Bayliss and people like they're like no thanks. Like, we can work for 3 months a year and no one really asks us too many questions. Thanks very much, and get paid not wildly different cash. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Um, so it's not the money that you need to attract the names that you might want. It's the some sort of assurance that your life isn't going to change incredibly just by
For
having that
worse.
job. Probably
Yeah.
worse. Like, you're up
Yeah.
against it. Like, you're kind of expected to win everything because
Absolutely.
you've got the most money and you've got the best team, right? If you're India, so you're kind of up against it. Like, the barometer of success is winning the World Cup. Like, England got to the semi-final and everyone was like, yeah, that's about right. It's fine. No one's that bothered over here. And England are expected to beat the West Indies at home in the test that start in a couple of days. But the country won't go ballistic if England don't. They'll be like, oh, that's good. The West Indies won a couple of tests. That's good to see, or whatever. Like, no one will care that much. And everyone will be over it in a week's time. That doesn't happen in India. India lose
Yeah.
a test series like that and the whole country's going, you know, berserko. Um,
Mm.
so that's why it's difficult to get the best qualified person to do that job,
Yeah.
because there's so much that comes with it, right? Um, I still think there are names out there they could get. There are, I don't know what Fletcher does now. He's probably a bit too old for it. Farbrace is a guy that is underrated as a coach. I think this Bazball stuff
Mm.
is the way that it's called Bazball is given to McCullum. Farbrace
Yeah.
started all of this, and he doesn't get any credit for it. He
Mm.
took over England, having got achieved a lot in cricket with Sri Lanka and others, um,
Mm.
getting teams that were quite poorly rated, achieving way more than they kind of were expected to. He then got hold of England for a series and went, right, lads, just after we'd played in a World Cup and absolutely stank the place out, losing to Bangladesh and all the rest of it, picking the wrong team, picking the wrong squad, playing in the wrong way, using all the wrong metrics to pick a cricket team. He just turned and went, right, lads, what we're going to do, we're going to start building for the future now. I'm only going to be here for 5 minutes, but we're going to whack it and see what happens. It's one of the best ODI series of all time, what happened in that series against New Zealand. Everybody scoring 350. And this is a team, England were doing their absolute best to score 250 and failing half the time when he took over. So he's a guy who I would definitely ask to see what he's up to. He's on the county circuit again now. Um, but is he a guy that could handle the
Yeah.
absolute fervor and media circus and pressure that comes with that job? And he
Mm.
probably said, not for me, thanks. I don't really want to. So it kind of, more than other countries, I would say it's a better fit for an Indian national, the
Yeah.
India job. I think non-Indian coaches would probably agree with you. The ones that have done it in the past would be like, it was too tough for me to come in and do it. Um, Anyway, it's going to be Gambhir, isn't it? We're
Mm.
pretty sure of that, and let's see how he goes.
Looks
But
like it.
it might be a bit tricky because um, there's some high-profile retirements there, and
Mm.
as we've tried to go through, like, who are the off spinners? Who are the guys that are going to replace? They've got a lot of absolute legends coming towards the end or have already ended their career in certain formats, and you have to be able to replace them. And no team ever has just gone, right, these lot are out and these lot are in, and we're going to be just as good as we were before. It doesn't happen,
Mm.
right? It can't
Yeah.
happen. You need a mix of youth and experience, and so it's going to be tricky for Gambhir when he takes over. India aren't going to win every single game, and they aren't going to win every single tournament. Uh, But yeah, let's see how he goes. I'm just hoping from where I'm looking that it'll be funny. That's kind of what I want out of cricket the most.
Funny wasn't the term that I was expecting. It's going to be intense, uh, explosive, and it that word explosive can be interpreted in either way. But just to conclude the conversation, India had been looking for an Indian candidate, and Jay Shah as well specified so. There was a stage in India's journey as a cricketing nation when it needed foreign coaches. For example, what John Wright brought to the table, what Gary Kurtzon helped India with. But in the last decade, India has gravitated towards Indian coaches. It has worked out fine for India. Now there's a trophy to show for as well. And it looks like India would be backing the Indian coaches for a considerable while now. And there's another aspect that we probably didn't consider. For all of these players, they want to stay with their families once they've enjoyed a successful career as a batter, as a bowler, as a cricketer. And then what India job entails is the player being away for the family from the family for at least 10 months in a year, because the players, rather the coach, the players get their small windows in between where they are rested, but the coach cannot be rested. And if he does get rested, there's a lot of brick bats that he invites, and it's just that those 2 months of IPL that you get to spend time with your family. Otherwise, you're on the run at all times. So, makes it tricky for anybody volunteering for the position, and it would be really interesting to see how it pans out for Gautam Gambhir, assuming that he'd take up that job, he'd be offered that job, he's been offered that job, he'd take up that job, because you never know. Next week we be dissecting a different candidate altogether, because at the moment there's nothing that we know of. We are just speculating. Anyway, thank you so much, Rob, and thank you all for commenting. And remember, do follow us across the social media platforms so that we can stay connected. We'd be back with more such podcasts. Goodbye and take care.
Bye.